The morning sun spilled through the narrow streets of downtown, brushing against the glass windows of the Steamhouse Cafe, a cozy corner spot known for its mellow jazz and signature caramel roast. The smell of fresh espresso drifted outside as Caleb Brooks stepped off the curb, adjusting his faded denim jacket. It was his day off, a quiet Saturday, perfect for coffee, peace, and maybe a few minutes of reflection. He had been coming here for years. The staff used to greet him by name. The barista would already have his order started before he even reached the counter. But things had changed. There was a new manager and a new atmosphere. As Caleb pushed open the door, the little bell above it chimed. Conversations faltered for a second. Eyes flicked toward him. A couple at the corner table paused mid-laugh, and an elderly man lowered his newspaper just enough to glance over. Caleb was used to that sort of attention, but the silence that followed felt heavier than usual. He smiled faintly and stepped to the counter. "Morning. Double espresso, 2 sugars, please." The man behind the counter, Ethan Carlisle, the new manager, barely looked up from the register. Mid-30s, slick haircut, expensive watch. His posture screamed control. Ethan finally looked up, his gaze sliding from Caleb's sneakers to his plain grey t-shirt and worn jeans. His lips tightened. Sir, we're not open to the public yet. We're holding a private brunch this morning for members." Caleb blinked, confused. "Members? This cafe never had a membership system. I've been coming here for years." Ethan's tone hardened, polished with fake politeness. "Well, things are different now. New management, new standards, so if you could kindly leave before our guests arrive." Caleb frowned slightly. "You're saying I don't meet the standard?" Ethan straightened, crossing his arms. "I'm saying this is a private event, and I'm asking you to leave before I have to call security." The quiet hum of the cafe dimmed even further. A few customers who had stayed silent now exchanged glances. The waitress behind the espresso machine hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Caleb could feel the heat of eyes burning into him, strangers silently judging, whispering, waiting for him to react. He took a deep breath, forcing calm. "I think there's a misunderstanding," he said evenly. "I'm not some random guy off the street. I helped." Ethan cut him off. "Sir, you're disrupting business. Either you step outside or I'll call the building security team. Your choice." Caleb looked at him for a long moment, the tension stretching between them like a wire ready to snap. The arrogance, the superiority. He'd seen it before. The assumption that a black man in jeans didn't belong somewhere decent. A woman nearby murmured, "Just let him order, for God's sake." But Ethan ignored her, reaching for the phone near the register. "Last warning." Caleb's jaw tightened. He could easily explain who he was. He could tell Ethan that the very floors beneath his feet, the polished wood panels, the custom oak counter, were his handiwork. That he had designed, built, and stained every inch of this cafe back when it first opened 10 years ago. But something inside him resisted. He wanted to see just how far this new manager would take his arrogance. "I'll leave," Caleb said quietly. "But you should know something first." Ethan raised an eyebrow, phone still in hand. "Oh? And what's that?" Caleb gave a slow smile, not angry, just patient. "You're about to regret this conversation." He turned and walked out, the bell chiming again as the door shut behind him. Ethan stood frozen for a second, staring after him, unsure why the man's calm confidence unsettled him so deeply. Outside, Caleb paused on the sidewalk, taking in a breath of cold morning air. He glanced up at the cafe sign, the same sign he'd helped install years ago, its edges now faded by time. He thought of Mr. Harris, the previous owner, the man who had trusted him, paid him fairly, and treated him with respect. Caleb checked his watch. He had an appointment in 20 minutes, and the timing couldn't have been more poetic. Because the Steamhouse Cafe, the same place that had just told him to leave before security was called, wasn't just a random spot to him. It was one of the 7 businesses under the company he now owned, the result of years of hard work, risk, and reinvestment. And in 20 minutes, he would be sitting in a board meeting upstairs, finalizing paperwork to become the new majority owner of the Steamhouse itself. As he looked back through the cafe window, his reflection stared back, calm, focused, unshaken. The same customers still sat watching, unaware of who they'd just seen. Ethan was laughing now with another customer, smug and unaware. Caleb smiled to himself, whispering under his breath, "Enjoy your morning, manager. It's your last one here." He slipped his hands into his jacket pockets and walked down the block, his quiet footsteps carrying a storm that none of them saw coming. By noon, the Steamhouse Cafe was bustling. The brunch crowd filled the air with laughter, clinking cups, and the smell of buttered croissants. Ethan Carlyle stood proudly behind the counter, watching his servers move like clockwork. Everything was running just as he liked, smooth, controlled, and polished. He had already forgotten about the man from the morning, the one in jeans who thought he could just walk in. To Ethan, he was just another entitled nobody. He'd dealt with his kind before, people who thought politeness was optional. "Ethan," called Sophie, the head waitress, as she approached the counter. "There's someone asking to speak with the manager. Says it's important." Ethan sighed. "Who is it now? Another influencer wanting free coffee?" "No," Sophie said carefully. "He's dressed sharp, like really sharp. Black suit, tie, the works. He's waiting by table 7. Ethan smirked. "Fine. Guess it's networking time." He adjusted his apron, smoothed his hair, and walked toward table 7, where Caleb Brooks sat quietly, a sleek briefcase beside him. Ethan froze for a fraction of a second, recognition flashing across his face. The man from this morning. But this version of him was different, commanding, confident, impossible to ignore. His dark suit fit perfectly, the silver tie clip glinting in the afternoon light. Gone was the casual man in jeans. In his place was someone who radiated authority. "Wait," Ethan stammered. "You again?" "I told you." Caleb raised a hand, calm and measured. "You did," he said. "You told me to leave before you called security. Don't worry, I'm not here for coffee today." Ethan folded his arms defensively. "Then what do you want?" Caleb smiled faintly. "You'll find out soon enough. But first, I'd like you to bring the current staff together here in the dining area, including the baristas and waiters." Ethan frowned. "Why would I?" Before he could finish, the cafe door opened and 3 people entered. Mr. Langford, the senior representative from Brookstone Enterprises, followed by 2 assistants carrying folders. Ethan's stomach dropped. Brookstone Enterprises. That was the investment group that had recently acquired a controlling interest in the steam house. He'd received a memo about them, but he hadn't expected a visit today. Langford approached with a warm smile. "Mr. Brooks, everything's in order. The paperwork is finalized. Congratulations on becoming the new majority owner of the Steam House Cafe." The words hit like thunder in the silent cafe. Forks clinked against plates. Whispers spread through the room, and Ethan's confident expression crumbled into disbelief. Caleb stood, his tone polite but cuttingly clear. "Thank you, Mr. Langford." He turned to the stunned manager. "You might remember this morning, Ethan. You told me I didn't belong here, that this cafe had standards." Ethan's throat tightened. I didn't know who you were." Caleb's eyes narrowed slightly. "You didn't need to. Respect isn't supposed to depend on who someone is. It's about decency, something I expect from anyone representing this establishment." The entire staff had gathered now, wide-eyed and silent. Sophie, the waitress from earlier, looked almost apologetic. Caleb looked around, voice steady but strong. "I built the counters you're standing behind. I installed the floors beneath your feet. I watched this cafe grow from an idea into a community space. And I've spent the last decade building a company that owns businesses like this all across the city. When I walked in this morning, I came as a customer, a loyal one, but I was treated like I didn't belong." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "That's not the culture I want for this place, not under my ownership." Langford nodded approvingly. "We'll begin the transition immediately. All management decisions will now go through Mr. Brooks." Ethan's face turned pale. "Wait, this must be some mistake. You can't just—" "Oh, I can," Caleb interrupted calmly. "And I will. Effective immediately, you're relieved of your duties as manager." The cafe gasped collectively. Ethan's lips parted in shock. "You're firing me? Right here?" Caleb didn't flinch. "You fired yourself the moment you decided someone's worth based on their clothes or skin color. I'm just making it official." Langford handed over an envelope, termination papers neatly prepared. Ethan stared at it, speechless, before grabbing his apron and storming toward the door. He stopped halfway, turning to Caleb. "You'll regret this," he spat bitterly. "I was the best thing that happened to this place." Caleb met his glare with quiet authority. "No, the best thing that could happen to this place is respect, something you never offered." Ethan left without another word, the bell above the door echoing through the stunned silence. Caleb exhaled slowly, then turned to the staff. "Now, let's start fresh. No more judgment, no more pretense. We're going to rebuild this cafe into what it was meant to be, a place where everyone feels welcome." Sophie raised her hand hesitantly. "Does that mean we're keeping our jobs?" Caleb smiled warmly. You are, every one of you. You'll have fair pay, fair treatment, and a chance to grow. All I ask in return is that you remember what hospitality really means. The tension in the air melted. The barista clapped softly, then another. Soon, the whole cafe joined in a small but heartfelt applause. Caleb nodded, humbled. All right. Let's make the steam house proud again. As Langford shook his hand and left, Caleb sat back down, finally ordering his double espresso. 2 sugars, just how he liked it. Sophie brought it to him herself, smiling shyly. For the record, sir, I'm glad it's you. Caleb smiled. Me too. He took a sip, the bitterness of the coffee mixing with quiet satisfaction. The cafe buzzed with renewed energy, laughter returning, music flowing again, and for the first time in a long while, Caleb felt at peace. Outside, the same sunlight that had witnessed his humiliation now poured through the windows, brighter and warmer. The city moved on, unaware that inside this small cafe, a lesson had been written. One about dignity, humility, and the power of calm justice. Ethan Carlyle sat in his car across the street from the Steamhouse Cafe, his jaw clenched and knuckles white around the steering wheel. The words still echoed in his mind. Effective immediately, you're relieved of your duties. He had never been humiliated like that before, especially not in front of his entire staff and a room full of customers. He slammed his palm against the dashboard. Who the hell does he think he is? He'd Googled Caleb Brooks the moment he left, and the results stunned him. Founder of Brookstone Enterprises, real estate developer, philanthropist, investor in multiple urban businesses. Caleb wasn't just another customer, he was a man of real influence. But Ethan refused to accept defeat. There had to be something in Caleb's past that could tarnish his image. Hours passed as Ethan sat there, scrolling through search results, news archives, and property records. He was desperate. Envy burned in his chest like acid. Finally, a name popped up in an old article from 10 years ago, local carpenter injured in construction site accident. Lawsuit dropped. It was about Caleb. He'd once been a construction worker, not a businessman. Ethan smirked. So that's where you came from, huh? The dirt. He decided he'd use it. He'd twist it. Maybe claim Caleb lied about his background. Maybe whisper that he wasn't qualified to run an upscale cafe chain. He knew the right people. Gossipers in the local business community. A few journalists who owed him favors. The next morning, Ethan showed up at the cafe, still wearing that arrogant smirk, despite being fired. Sophie spotted him first and froze. You can't be here, Ethan. Oh, I can, he said smoothly. I'm just here to talk. Caleb emerged from the office, crisp suit again, calm as ever. Mr. Carlyle, he greeted. You're trespassing. Ethan chuckled. Relax, boss, I just came to return my keys and offer you some advice. He walked closer, lowering his voice. You see, I know people, and people love a good story, especially one about a self-made man who wasn't so honest about where he came from. Caleb raised an eyebrow. Are you threatening me? Ethan shrugged. Just saying. It'd be a shame if your investors found out that the big businessman they admire used to be a lowly carpenter who built this cafe with his own hands. Caleb finished calmly, stepping closer until they stood eye to eye. You think that's something to be ashamed of? Ethan blinked, thrown off. Caleb's voice grew firm, though never raised. I'm proud of where I came from. Every scar, every sleepless night, every mistake, it made me who I am. You want to tell people I worked hard for my success? Go ahead. Maybe they'll learn something. Ethan tried to recover. You think you're untouchable, huh? Money doesn't erase where you came from. Caleb's expression softened. Neither does arrogance. But humility can. The staff had gathered quietly around them now. Sophie crossed her arms, glaring at Ethan. You should go before you embarrass yourself again. But Ethan wasn't done. You think firing me fixes everything? You humiliated me. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are. Caleb looked him straight in the eye. Do that. But make sure you tell them everything. The part where you threw a loyal customer out because of the color of his skin, and how that customer turned out to be your employer. The cafe fell silent. Even the espresso machine seemed to stop hissing. Ethan's face turned red. He stammered something under his breath, then turned sharply and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the bell rattled. Caleb watched him go, his shoulders steady, his calm returning like the tide. He turned to the staff. Let's move on. The best revenge is success and kindness. Now, let's get back to work. Later that evening, Caleb sat in his office upstairs looking out the window. The cafe below buzzed with new energy, laughter, music, comfort, the kind of atmosphere the steam house had been missing for a long time. He smiled faintly, remembering how it all started, the days when he was just a young carpenter with big dreams and empty pockets. Back then, he never imagined he'd one day own a company. He only wanted to build something that lasted. There was a soft knock at his door. Sophie peeked in, holding a folder. "Mr. Brooks, a woman's asking to see you. Says she's Ethan's sister." Caleb looked up, intrigued. "Send her in." A woman entered, tall, nervous, clutching her handbag tightly. "Mr. Brooks, my name is Rachel Carlyle. I heard about what happened between you and my brother. I'm not here to defend him, but—" Caleb gestured for her to sit. "Please, go on." She hesitated, then whispered, "He's not well. He's angry because he's been losing everything lately. His marriage, his house. I think what happened here pushed him over the edge. Please, just be careful." Caleb's eyes softened. "I appreciate your honesty." Rachel sighed. "He blames you. He said he'd make you pay." Caleb leaned back, thoughtful. "If he comes after me, he'll only destroy himself. But maybe I can stop him before he does." Rachel frowned. "You'd help him after what he did?" Caleb smiled faintly. "That's what makes me different from him." Outside, the cafe lights glowed warm against the night, and somewhere in the dark, Ethan's car engine roared to life. He wasn't done yet, and neither was Caleb. The next few days passed in deceptive calm. The Steamhouse Cafe flourished under Caleb's leadership. Customers returned in waves, praising the warm atmosphere and fair treatment. Staff worked with new enthusiasm, and the cafe's profits began to rise faster than anyone expected. But beneath that peace, something darker brewed. Ethan Carlyle couldn't let go. He'd spent every night since his firing replaying that humiliating scene over and over. Caleb's calm face, the applause, the way the cafe had turned against him. His anger had grown into obsession. He spent hours on social media, writing fake reviews, sending rumors to local business pages, and emailing gossip blogs about Caleb's shady past. At first, his efforts seemed to fail. But one morning, Sophie burst into Caleb's office, phone in hand, her face pale. "Sir, you need to see this." Caleb looked up from his paperwork. "What's wrong?" She handed him her phone. The headline read, "New cafe owner's dark past. Sources claim Caleb Brooks hid criminal record before success." Caleb scrolled through the article, a web of lies and exaggerations. It twisted his old lawsuit and work injury into accusations of insurance fraud. There were fake quotes, fabricated witnesses, and an edited photo that made him look guilty. Sophie's voice trembled. "People are already sharing it. The cafe's page is getting hate comments." Caleb leaned back, steady as ever. "Ethan," Sophie nodded. "It has to be him." Caleb sighed deeply. "All right, then we don't fight fire with fire. We show them the truth." He called a press meeting for the next morning at the steam house. By dawn, the cafe buzzed with reporters, photographers, and curious locals. Caleb stood at the counter, where Ethan once sneered at him, the same spot where his humiliation began. When the cameras flashed, he didn't flinch. He stepped forward, composed and sincere. 10 years ago, he began, I was a carpenter. I fell from scaffolding while working a double shift and was out of work for months. The insurance company accused me of fraud when I was the one who got hurt. I fought back, lost my savings, and nearly lost my home. But I didn't give up. I learned, rebuilt, and started again, legally and honestly. I am not ashamed of that. I am proud. The crowd murmured. Reporters scribbled notes. Caleb continued, his tone unwavering. If someone thinks my past disqualifies me from success, they're mistaken. My story isn't about scandal. It's about resilience. He paused, meeting the eyes of every person watching. The Steamhouse Cafe will not be torn down by lies. We'll stand taller because of them. The applause began slowly. A few hands, then dozens. Sophie wiped a tear. Even some reporters smiled. Within hours, clips of Caleb's speech went viral, drowning out the false story. Hashtags like #RespectCalebBrooks and #BuiltFromNothing spread across social media. But while Caleb was reclaiming his narrative, Ethan was spiraling. He watched the press conference from a bar downtown, face pale, eyes red from lack of sleep. His phone buzzed non-stop, messages from angry readers calling him out, people identifying him as the source of the false story. His name was being dragged through the same mud he had thrown. In a panic, he rushed to the cafe that evening. The rain was pouring, soaking his clothes, but he didn't care. He burst through the door shouting, You ruined me, Caleb. The cafe went silent. Customers turned. Caleb looked up from a table near the counter, calm, even as Ethan trembled with rage. I didn't ruin you, Caleb said softly. You did that yourself. Ethan's voice cracked. You took everything, my job, my reputation, my life. Caleb stood, walking toward him slowly. No, Ethan, you threw it away when you decided to hate instead of learn. Ethan's shoulders shook. For a moment, his anger faltered, replaced by despair. I wanted respect. I worked hard. Nobody saw it. Caleb's tone softened. Respect isn't earned by stepping on others. It's built through humility. The same way this cafe was built, piece by piece. Ethan looked at him, rain dripping from his hair, eyes hollow. You could have destroyed me completely. Why didn't you? Caleb's voice was quiet but powerful. Because I remember what it's like to have nothing. And I know revenge fixes nothing. For the first time, Ethan didn't argue. He looked around, at the customers watching, at the staff who had once looked up to him, now staring with pity instead of fear. He dropped his shoulders and whispered, I'm sorry. Caleb nodded once. Then start over. Be better. That's how you fix it. Ethan hesitated, then turned toward the door. But before leaving, he stopped. You're a better man than I ever was, he said softly, and disappeared into the rain. The cafe exhaled. Sophie approached Caleb quietly. You think he'll change? Caleb looked out the window, watching the rain wash the street clean. Everyone can change if they want to, even him. He walked back to his table, finished his coffee, and smiled faintly. Outside, the city lights shimmered through the drizzle, reflecting off the cafe's glass, the same glass he had once installed with his own 2 hands. Now it reflected something else, a man who had turned pain into power, and power into grace. Later that night, as the last customer left and the lights dimmed, Caleb stood alone behind the counter, running his hand over the polished wood. It was smooth, warm and familiar, a reminder of where it all began. He whispered almost to himself, never forget the hands that built your dream. And as the rain faded into silence, the Steamhouse Cafe glowed softly in the night, a symbol not of wealth or power, but of resilience, respect, and redemption.